being a GP is a bit like being a shit hairdresser. You have to go in and you have to figure out how to make people's lives better. But the major factor with that statement is that doesn't mean anything unless the patient is motivated to change. If the patient comes in and you say, you need to do X, Y, and Z to make this condition better, and they don't, that's on them. And that's the truth. I can do all I can, but if they have the mental capacity to say, I get that if I don't do these treatments, I might come to serious harm or death, and they decide not to, there is nothing I can do about that.
This is a first where I'm actually recording with a guest who I don't know who it is. So what should I call you? Mr. GP? Doc?
No, I think, why don't you call me Max? I think that's a good starting point.
Cool. So Max, which is the pseudonym moniker which you've used to write this book. So why are you anonymous?
Yeah, that's right. So I guess my full anonymized name is Dr. Max Skittle, and Max to everyone, including my patients. Why anonymous? Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. The first is to protect my patients. I mean, when you decide to write something like a warts and all book, a medical biography, or sort of talking about your life and the job, you need to protect the confidentiality of your patients. And that's not just anonymizing them and changing ages and genders and ethnicities, but it's also about, I guess, protecting yourself. So by me being anonymous, it gives another layer of protection to my patients. And it probably stops me from getting fired as well. So it's a kind of a win-win.
Yeah, I get that. Well, sadly, we've broken at least one of the potential fibs that you had, which was that you could have been Maxine in real life. So that one's out the window.
I may just have a very deep voice. You have no idea.
Imagine. Or if you're using a really fancy voice modulator, that would have been...
Exactly.
That would have been
You never
cool.
know.
So
you never know.
Why did you decide to write this book?
Good question. I mean, I think there's probably the simple answer is that I love talking about health and I love writing. And I think that the opportunity came up when I kept coming home and I was like, that's just such a good experience, or such a haunting experience, or such a hilarious experience. And the emotions that it made me feel on that day, I just thought, you know what, why can't we put this down on paper, and why can't we share it with people and let them see what the job's like, and let them see, life's journey through the eyes of multiple patients. And you might find that some of them resonate with you. You might see a journey of a patient that I've written about and gone, yeah, that was me. Or it might be that that's you in the future. Like, you have no idea. And that's the sort of thing that led me to write the book.
It's kind of semi-autobiographical diaries format, isn't it? It kind of goes through day by day over a tight period.
Yeah, that's right. It's a diarized version of a year in my life. And it sort of takes you through the journey of my day-to-day patients, but also gives you an understanding about what happens behind the scenes. Like, how does a GP surgery run? What are the highs and lows? What are the hiccups? And then I suppose as a sub-context to that, it's about my life and about my young family, and I guess how that blurring of the work-life balance occurs and how it impacted in me. And then, because that's something I guess that we all experience, we're desperate to try and keep our work and our life separate to a degree, but with technology and just the emotions that work pulls out of people now, you realize that that's not possible. And in the book, there are definitely times when that comes through.
Would you say that you're a typical representation of a GP? Are you a fairly representative GP? Is your experience going to be sort of synonymous with many others?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that GPs experience necessarily a different caseload. I mean, we all see the same people walking through the doors. It varies a little bit because what happens is people decide who they want to see. And so you start to get a bit of a niche. So, for example, I knew that I loved seeing children because it allows you to be a kid for 10 minutes. But also sort of adolescents and teenagers who I guess prefer someone who, yeah, I mean, let's be blunt, I'm not near to their age, but nearer to their age than, say, a 50 or 60-year-old GP.
Yeah.
And he's fairly straight talking. And that's something that I've always tried to do. I don't beat around the bush. I think you need to be honest with people. And that's never more the case than with your patients in front of you.
Yeah, the topic of work-life balance really interested me. Like, I had a question down here that just asked, are GPs normal people? But upon reading the book, it comes across that you are, but there's something weird, and everyone that's listening might feel the same, or this might just be some bizarre quirk of my own mentality. But
yeah,
you kind of see GPs, doctors, as these like weird, angelic, omnipotent sort of fountains of life-givingness. You almost don't expect them to have a life outside of that. It sounds bizarre. Like, I expect a bus driver to be gruff to me if he's had a bad day, but I don't expect my GP to do that. Does that make sense?
It does.
I kind of believe that they're almost above the decree, the law of normal behavior.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wasn't sure if I could swear on this, Chris.
Fire away, man! Fire away.
I mean, to be blunt, I mean, it's bullshit. I mean, we're all human, and GPs more so than ever. The concept of emotion is a really difficult one with the GP, and I think it varies throughout your career, because basically you have to learn to really suppress it when you're in front of a patient, because you probably read in the book, there are patients that make me see red. There are ones that make you want to cry. There are ones that make you want to bang the desk, shout at them, just be like, what the hell are you doing? But you have to try and compose that to a degree, and then tell them in a steady tone that I think they're crazy, that I think they're mad for making that decision, that I think they're talking shit, and that I'm going to give them the truth, and that's the reality, and that we need to find some way of marrying the patient agenda with my GP agenda, because my agenda is always to try and do the best for that patient. But the challenge is that they don't always see it that way, and that's part of the beauty of the job. But there's a veneer to being a GP, and what happens, I mean, it happened in the book, Secret GP, that veneer gets scratched away at points, because when you've been slammed by the 15th super complex unhappy patient 10 minutes after 10 minutes, like, you just want to explode. And there are times when I feel like that. Actually, I've had a day like that today, where I've literally come home and I want to sit down and have a beer and just decompress, because it's been one of those days. And I mean, you try and mask it as much as you can, but actually I think conversely, patients want to see you as a person. You're not, as you said, this sort of like, you're not a deity, you're nothing like that. You are a human who has learnt a job, and you're trying to help the person in front of you. And it's not about being nice to them, it's about being honest and telling them the truth and helping them through processes related to their health. And you can have a nice shit GP if you want, but that's not what I want to be.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. How much time per month do you think that you spend with your finger inside a bum's total on average?
That's a good question, actually. I mean, I don't hang around when I'm up there. Let's be honest.
Well, so okay, let's work it out. So what's typical rectal exam length? 20 seconds?
Yeah, because you got to essentially get them on their side, laying on their sort of fetal position, knees up. I usually sort of say, think of Queen of Country. You got a lubed, gelled glove.
Yep. Into gluteal cleft.
Yeah, absolutely.
Weren't expecting me to know that, were you, Dr. Skittle? That's because one of my best friends is also a doctor as well. So
fantastic. So you know what to ask me now. Okay. And you examine the outside, and then you say, okay, bit of pressure, and then you go, and you sweep around feeling for masses, and you sweep around feeling the prostate, or the edge of the prostate, and then you come out, look at the glove. You're looking for blood. You're looking for mucus, and then you go away and give them a tissue. And not to wipe their eye, that's to just sort the other end, or two tissues sometimes. And that's it. But yeah, I mean, I've probably got enough. I've probably had my finger up for long enough to see a good ad break. in a month.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I mean, it's all just it's all just accumulating time, you know. I had salmonella a couple of years ago from Africa. Yeah, really would not recommend it.
Yeah.
I got a call. That wasn't a finger up the bum scenario.
No, you don't need one for that.
Shame.
No.
But
there are paid services everywhere. I'm sure you can find it.
I would just need to get a really good friend.
Exactly.
I got a call. Here's an interesting one for you. I didn't even think of this. I got a call from Environmental Health asking where I'd been eating recently because they knew that I had salmonella before I got a call from my doctor's surgery telling me that the diagnosis was salmonella.
Yeah, it's pretty swift, isn't it? So Public Health England will have notifiable diseases. If salmonella comes up, they need to find where the source is and track it down and isolate it if need be. I mean, you know, it's a very different game when we think about the coronavirus pandemic, but it's that on steroids, really, isn't it?
Got you. Yeah, I was like, I'm going to guess that's my diagnosis. Thank you for telling me. And just obviously some girl on the other end of the phone trying to track down like a hotel that had been serving bad chicken or something. I'm like, unless you fly to Africa, that's not going to happen.
Pretty tough. Yeah.
How hard is it to get fired as a GP?
Well, I haven't been fired yet, but I'm probably working quite hard to. I think it's pretty hard. You know, GPs are in demand. You know, we're short thousands of GPs, and government after government make pledges that they're going to, boost, the GP numbers by 5,000 come 2020, 2021, and it just doesn't quite get there. I think to get struck off, to get fired as a GP, I think you have to have gross misconduct, and they're the kind of guys and girls that you're seeing in the Daily Mail after their sort of lawsuit. So you're seeing people that are sort of using sexual exploitation, taking photographs, unnecessary examinations. You wouldn't get struck off for just being a bad GP. You get pulled aside, mentored, trained up. I mean, the training is good. The reason you'd probably get fired is if you've got a darker side to you that comes out.
Yeah. I was thinking that the stakes are obviously quite high. There's a story in the book about a lady who comes through and points a finger at you and accuses you of not detecting her husband's soon to onset heart attack that kills him. And it's like, well, obviously there's a lot of emotion and not culpability, but there's a potential for someone to find you, create you, be the reason, the behest of this particular problem that's occurred, right?
And to be honest with you, Chris, that happens a lot, partly because we're the person sat in front of them. You know, if you're looking for someone to blame for a loved one's death, a GP is someone who's there, is accessible, and often I think I remember I said about this in the book with that particular lady. You know, it's a grief reaction, and I've bared no bad feelings towards her, because while it was a horrible experience for me, her experience was immeasurably worse, and what I was receiving from her was her grief reaction. And that, I suppose that's, you get a thick skin as a GP, as a doctor in general, I think, or as a nurse or any healthcare professional, you get a thick skin because that stuff happens all the time. You get blamed for missing cancers, you get blamed for not diagnosing heart attacks or not seeing the signs of one. You know, we are human, and I will miss things in my career. I will miss cancers. I know that because I'm not infallible, and I'm human, and it's just that's the life that we live, and every doctor knows that. If you speak to a doctor who says, I'm never going to miss a cancer, I'm never going to miss an acute serious illness that could lead to a fatality, I think they're killing themselves. I mean, we have to have the humility to say, I'm really going to fuck up at some point, and I'm going to have to just shoulder that, because if you're seeing
at all times,
and if you're seeing hundreds of patients a week, you just need to miss one thing, like just one tiny thing, one subtle symptom. That's
stakes are high, Max. The stakes are really really
but
high.
That's why I love the job. I mean, I love the risk that comes with it. People when I suddenly realized I was coming out of medical school and going into being a GP, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be the most boring experience of my life. But, I've done A&E, I've survived all that, I've enjoyed it, it's great fun, but I want to come home on the weekends, I want to come home to my family in the evenings. Let's make that decision. What I found is that every day is just a cacophony of experiences with patients, and I love it. Like, from the acute illnesses to the utterly weird and wonderful to the sad and somber. I mean, one day you can be talking about someone's sore knee, and within 10 minutes you're talking to, the guy in the book, Benny, who comes in and his question is, seriously, Max, what's the meaning of life? and that puts him immediately on my top 5 patient list of all time, because just to have the guts to come in and ask the question that perhaps we all do wonder from time to time, particularly at sort of 2 a.m. when you can't sleep, to come in and ask me and think that I'm going to have the answer. Yeah,
it's a low-key compliment, man. Really is. I know who's going to have the answer to this. Dr. Skittle. Dr. Skittle knows the answer to this one.
Exactly. And well, you had to read the book to find out what happens. But he's one of my all-time favorites. Never forget him.
It's a little bit like being a doctor, being a GP sounds a little bit like being a really hardcore hairdresser. Like, everyone that comes in, their hair's shit. Like, it's totally shit. And the best that you can do is get them to leave with an acceptable hairdo, which might happen in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Having, like you and like all of us, just gone through the lockdown and had a lockdown haircut and tried to cut my wife's hair.
Oh dear.
It is not that easy. And so, first of all, let's just give a hats off to the hairdressers. Absolutely, because it is not easy. But yeah, I mean, being a GP is a bit like being a shit hairdresser. You have to go in and you have to figure out how to make people's lives better. But the major factor with that statement is that doesn't mean anything unless the patient is motivated to change. If the patient comes in and you say, you need to do X, Y, and Z to make this condition better, and they don't, that's on them. That's not that, and that's the truth. I can do all I can to try and encourage them, make them see and understand why they need to do something. But if they have the mental capacity to say, I get that if I don't do these treatments, I might come to serious harm or death, and they decide not to, there is nothing I can do about that.
That really surprised me to find that out. A doctor tells me to do a thing, and I'm pretty much to the letter. But you had a lady who had put off a breast cancer assessment four times because of work. You had a guy who was like pre-diabetic, high blood cholesterol, smoked every day, drank every day, didn't eat anything, was also like, looked like he might be a low-key 60-year-old porn star. And then
Mr. Tosca, he was one of my faves. He was like, just came in smelling of sort of stale cigar and sex. He was a great guy. I hope he's still with us.
But all these people, and they're not. You're saying, look, this is where you're at. And there was another lady who had an existential crisis in front of you and didn't bother to go to her cancer treatment or whatever because she was like, just give it to someone that deserves it. And I'm thinking, like, just seeing people like that, it must be challenging as a doctor to do the thing, get them to this as much as you can do, lead a horse to water, but then you get stuck.
It is, and some people find that harder than others. So for me, I'm very, I'm blunt. I will say that, if you don't do this, this is what could happen. And of course you do. I don't want people to think that's me being incredibly harsh and then going, that's it, I've wiped my hands with them. So the lady, for example, who you mentioned, I don't think it was a cancer treatment, it was her diabetes appointment. And she'd said, I'm not good enough to have treatment, give it to someone else who's salvageable. And in the book, I think I said, I will follow up with her in a few weeks' time and I will say, oi, have you changed your mind? And here's why you should change your mind again. And you keep doing that. So I guess what I'm saying is people may listen to me or they may read the book, which I'm getting a feeling it's going to be a bit of a Marmite book with people. They might think Max is a real dick, but actually every single decision I make, everything I say or do is in the patient's interests. Because that's why I love the job, because I'm doing something to try and help someone else. You just don't need to sugarcoat this stuff, because health is sugarcoated enough. You just sort of need to go on sort of Instagram and you can get some shiny enameled tooth doctor who can tell you this stuff. But the reality is that, you had to be blunt, you had to be harsh, because you're trying to do everything in their best interests.
The rubber really, really does meet the road when you go and sit down with a GP. I don't want the guy on Instagram who did a level 3 NVQ in physiotherapy. I don't want him. I want someone that had to go through the fire and brimstone that is 5 years of med school and 2 years of locum and blah, 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 blah.
And you experience that. And in The Secret GP, I have a couple of flashbacks to, there's a chapter about when I went through my GP training and what led me to make that decision. And there are stories in there about, the experiences that you go through as a junior doctor and how you cut your teeth. And as you say, how the rubber meets the road.
Can we play GP bingo? Can you try and come up with some of the cliche phrases that you either find yourself saying a lot or that you hear your other doctors saying a lot? So for instance, on this show, I'll tend to say something like the rubber meets the road, or the tip of the spear, or you got to have a pair of brass balls for that. What are some of the ones that you find yourself saying a lot?
So I think for me, often it's, what do you want? Because actually, sometimes you just need to cut through all the faff and just say to them, what is it you want? What do you think you've got? Definitely, what do you think you got? Because people will come in and they'll listen to you and they'll say, actually, well, I played Dr. Google and I think it's this.
That's the doctor equivalent of, do you know why I pulled you over?
Exactly. Exactly. Spot on. And then I suppose the other one is, so this is and I mentioned this in the epilogue as well. This is the pre-coronavirus statement. It's probably just a virus. Okay. And that is the most terrifying thing, isn't it? That for a GP, you come in, you're like, oh, I need antibiotics which treat bacterial infections. I've got a cough and I've got a sore throat and a runny nose. I need antibiotics. And you go, look, it's just a virus. It's a cold. Go home, spend time with your family, hug them, take paracetamol, go to work. You'll be fine. You don't need to stay off work for this. It's just a virus. I mean, fast forward to 2020 and it's a totally different world. Can
you imagine if you'd written this book from mid-2020 until early 2021?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, never say never. There might be another one in the pipeline at some point, but
the Corona GP. That's what I want.
Yeah, I mean, this is it'd be a different book. I mean, I'd be clad head to toe in personal protective equipment. I'd be two meters away from everyone, and I'd be on the phone all the time because GP has gone from 80% face to face, 20% phone call as a split to what was at one point for many months 100% face to face. 100% telephone call, and if you've got any symptoms that suggest you might have a coronavirus infection, you go off to a hot hub where you're met by specialist teams. So it's a totally different game, and but things are changing. We have to stay positive, and we have to think that things to a degree will return to a normal semblance of a NHS and a healthcare service that we know and love. But you'll probably find that GPs might talk to you on the phone more because we've realised how much we can actually manage on the telephone. And that frees up time. It means that we can speak to more patients and address more issues than perhaps historically we could.
You were saying that sometimes a significant portion of the 10-minute window you have to deal with a patient is actually taken up with them getting up from the seat, getting through reception,
Finding
the room that you were in. So take us through. You press the button and your 10-minute timer starts when you say, Christopher Williamson, please come to unit 5 or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. So put it in some context. When I was first a doctor and first a GP, I would read your notes, Chris, for about 10 minutes, and I'd be like, right, I know all about you. I'm going to call you in now. And you press the buzzer because you think that to have that information, you're in some way sort of forearmed about what's about to happen, which is just, it's just total bollocks, because what happens is you come in and you throw something out of left field, like, what's the meaning of life? So that's one of the things. So what we do is when I press that button, I stand at the door and I go, look, I wait for them to come down. Hi, it's Max. Come in. And then you just wait for them to start talking, because everyone will have a preset idea about what they want to say. So everyone has got a preset sort of, opening few sentences about Max, this is my problem. This is what I've got. And you need to let them get that out, because if you don't, you're basically stopping everything that's been stored up inside from them. And then you listen to it, and then you ask them more questions. And then by about minute 3, you've got a rough idea. You should have, or certainly I try to do, have a rough idea about what you think they've got and what you need to do. So what's your management plan? So what tests you need to do, what treatment are you going to give, and what follow-up are you going to have? And then the next 7 minutes are basically spent making that dream become a reality and getting them out the door at minute 10. Because, if you let it just kind of waffle on and drag on and let them sort of, give you war and peace, what happens is that you don't really get to the meat of the issue. Then you find that you can't address all their problems. And then you find that then knocks on to the rest of your clinic. So you have to be quite brutal. I sometimes will just stop people in their tracks and be like, just what? And like I said, when we were playing GP bingo, what's the problem? What do you think you got? What do you want? Because then you can make things happen. Whereas if you get to 10 minutes and they're still telling you about their first symptom, you can either push them out the door or you can listen, but then you basically make everyone else late for their appointments. So, you've got to be a little bit bullish about it.
It seems to me, I've got a number of friends who work in healthcare and are either junior doctors or on locum or whatever it might be. And they have said unanimously that the worst sorts of patients that they get are the ones who come in and don't have a defined problem. I don't know whether this is people who are hypochondriacs, whether this is people who are just lonely and want some attention. Do you often come across those?
Yeah, we do. And the undefined problem is sometimes the most unnerving problem, because, I've had experiences where patients have come in and they've said, I just don't feel right. And you're absolutely right. There is a large group of people that are lonely, that are isolated, that just want to see you to have company, and that really does happen. Or there are those people that think that they might have something. They've gone online, they've Googled, or they have a family member who's just been diagnosed with a cancer. They come and see you, and they don't want to say, I think I've got cancer, Max. They just say, I just don't feel right. And you have to explore that. And you sometimes hear, particularly sort of more junior doctors say, oh, he or she was a really bad historian. Like, they just didn't tell me they didn't give me any information. That's not true. Like, you're just not good at getting it. And you need to, it's your job. You're the detective. Your job is to say, okay, well, let's pick apart your life for a second. Who's at home with you? What's your daily routine like? What's your appetite like? What are you eating? Bowels okay? Passing urine? Sweating at night? Any weight loss? Bruising at all? Like, you just go through and you start in your head to mentally tick off this checklist. But then as you do that, you then come to the third category of the I just don't feel quite right people. And they're the ones that have got something serious going on, that this is just the first sign of a niggling symptom that then manifests itself. And you do your blood tests or you do your chest x-ray, and you reveal something else. And that's why it's really important. It's important never to ignore any patient, and it always to listen to them. And I think the one thing that keeps me going is that I've got diagnostic curiosity. You know, I want to know. I'm curious about
Sherlock
people.
Holmes, yeah.
Yeah, and when you do it that way, you don't miss stuff. If you get blasé, that's when you do miss stuff and you make mistakes.
Hey,
and then they're the ones that suffer.
We said on the show last year that curiosity is the most important personality trait of the 20th century. And it turns out not only is that true for entrepreneurs and podcasters, but also maybe for doctors as well, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get bored in a job like this, you know, you're going to switch off. You're not going to think. And then errors come in. I love my job. I wouldn't do anything else. I think it's brilliant. You know, you get to see the kind of light and the dark and all the shades of grey in between life.
It must be the spectrum of people and experiences that you're exposed to must be a real shock to the system, at least initially. It is.
So when I was working in the sort of inner city surgery where the book's set, you saw people from extreme affluence to extreme poverty, to different socioeconomic backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds with different cultural beliefs around health, to all the way to gang members. So, you know, there are people that would be your friends that you'd think I'd go out for dinner with them. There are to the people that you would cross the road actively to avoid. And you know, it's like, you know, in the book I talked about, I was out with, you know, my wife Alice, and we were walking, and she was like, I want a lollipop. And I'm like, okay, fine, you want a lollipop, all right. And then of course there's just a big gang of kids sort of who are just hovering around the shop door, who just look like they want to kill me. And then I'm just thinking, bloody hell, like, of all the manly things I need to go and get is a lollipop. So I go in, you know, I pick a Magnum because I think that's the most manly, masculine ice cream I could possibly get from the shop. And then on the way out, like, one of the kids goes, you know, all right, Dr. Max. And it turns out it's one of my patients. But you just don't know, you know, and it doesn't matter who they are. You help everyone. And because everyone's got a backstory, no one ended up in that position by choice. No one wants to see their GP. I think that's the other thing to say, Chris, is people don't, unless you're lonely, people don't want to come and say, I've got a problem. Like, people want to be healthy. It's just inherent in us. There's a very small minority of people who do like to be unhealthy and sort of be medicalized, but I think that's a story for another day. But you know, the majority of people want to be healthy, so they don't want to see us. And I think that's the other thing that we need to bear in mind.
It's an interesting dynamic, isn't it, for the relationship between. There's very few things that you have to go out of your way, like maybe the tax man, you know, or maybe like the people that deal with like environmental health. If you've got, you don't really want to go and see the guy that cleans your drains out, but even that's not. You know what I mean, there are lots. You know, there are lots. People don't. You know, we like to think people like seeing us, but actually, you know, making the best of a bad situation, mate. That's what you do.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I didn't know that doctors had performance targets. How does that work?
So I think what people might not realise is that GP surgery is essentially a business. I mean, it makes its own profits. And what happens is there's something called quality and outcome frameworks, which is QOF, which I really don't want to bore your listeners with, Chris, because it really is for the insomniacs to hear about this. But in a nutshell, you get if you have 10,000 people and 1,000 of those have high blood pressure, if you can control 95% of those people's blood pressure to within a certain target, you will get extra payment. So basically they're saying, well done, you've kept their blood pressure in good control, which means they have reduced risk of cardiovascular disease like heart attack or strokes. Therefore, we will reward you with a financial remuneration. And the concept is that by doing that, we are setting all these health indicators that if we can meet those targets are linked to research that says, if you do this, if you have this in this person, they will be healthier. And therefore they will have less morbidity, i.e. ill health, and less mortality, i.e. death. The issue I have with it is that it's retrospective. It's going, this guy has got high blood pressure. Brilliant. Right, let's give him a medication, check his kidney function blood test once a year, tell him to exercise and reduce his salt content, get the blood pressure down, and tick, we've met our QOF indicator, our target. What should happen is they should say, we'll pay you for the amount of people that you can keep off of that high blood pressure register. We'll pay you to think prospectively rather than retrospectively, to think prospectively and say, you as a practice do everything you can to keep them within a healthy body weight, having a healthy diet, exercising, and naturally keeping their blood pressure down. We'll reward that. Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't work like that for every target, but there are lots of, but lifestyle is, the sort of buzzword of the 20th century, but it's rooted in fact as well, and science, that if you can do the basics really well, you don't need drugs and you don't need interventions.
It's interesting thinking about the parallels between physiotherapy and doctors, because there's a perverse incentive, bizarrely, with a physio, in that when they get a person better, they no longer get paid off that person. And it's kind of this quaff thing is kind of somehow deriving its metrics of success from that in a weird way.
Yeah, they are. But I think the one thing I would say is that even with any healthcare professional, whether it be physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech and language, or nursing staff, doctors, there are always patients. Always. The world keeps turning. People keep getting older. People get musculoskeletal problems that need physiotherapy. It will never be short of supply.
How, if you were to coach everyone who's listening, thousands of people that are listening, if you could coach them through how to be the perfect patient, what would you tell them to do? What can we all do to make your lives easier and to also get better outcomes ourselves as patients?
Okay. All right. This is a good one. So let's go with top three. So top three, number one, turn up on time. Okay. But I appreciate there's probably going to be a lot of people shouting at me and being like, yeah, but Max, you're never on time anyway. So I can see where that sort of therein lies the rub.
Becomes circular.
Two is, if you're coming with something like a rash on your thigh. Two is, dress appropriately. So if you're coming to me with a sore knee, don't come wearing knee-high boots and skinny jeans, because it takes about 10 minutes for you to get that stuff off so I can actually look at your knee.
Yep.
And thirdly, I would say don't save up your problems. I think that's a really important one. So I have a lot of people that come to me and think that they're doing me this enormous service by going, Max, I've saved up my 7 problems, because I just thought, you want to see other people around the, in the previous week. So I just didn't want to take. So anyway, here's my 7 problems, and I'm dividing 7 by 10 minutes or 600 seconds, which, which I can't even do the math. Not long, basically. And you can't do it. So I would say 2, 3 at a real push. But I suppose, Chris, I'd sort of put a little alert on that as well, saying that I get it, because people sometimes say, oh, by the way, I've just got this little thing, and they think it's a little thing, but I in fact think it's a really big thing. And you then have to go through a whole process. So really interestingly, and the one I get a lot is, women might say, I talk to them about a couple of different issues, and then they'll say, oh, boy, just as they're going out the door, I've just got this one thing, like, I had this little sort of lump sort of just near my breast. And immediately, you think, okay, well, I can't unhear that.
You're halfway out the door, close the door.
And it could be for many reasons. It might be that they're anxious about bringing it up, and it's like like a 15-year-old going and trying buy a porn mag in a newsagent's, and they like buy about 7 different things before they kind of point at the Playboy and say, "And can I have that as well?" It's really difficult, but in any case, I've heard it. And at that point, you have to go, well, I have to examine you, or I would like to examine you if they give you permission. And you need a chaperone. So I need to go downstairs to the reception and get a trained chaperone from reception to stand and make sure that everything is above board. And if anything ever did come to light or be an issue, we had a third independent party. And then you examine them, and then you make a decision. That you can't do that in a minute. So I often will navigate that third tip by going, okay, if they say I've got 4 things, I'll say, just I don't want you to go into detail, but just give me the highlights, give me the top 4 bullet points. And I'll go knee pain, lump in the breast, constipation, and I've got sore eye. And I'll go, okay, tell me about the breast lump first.
You organize them in order of priority.
Yeah, you triage them because they might not. Why should they know that one is more important than the other? That's my job, and so sometimes you have to be blunter with others than some, but that's you try, and again, it's all about trying to get as much, maximizing the time and what you can give to that patient. And not getting annoyed at the same time.
I think not saving it up is a really, really good point. We were talking on this podcast on the pilot episode like 3 years ago about one of the regular co-hosts, Yusuf, who had I'm going to forget what it's called. He called it lemon ball, but it's actually got a very specific name. It's where one of the testicular ducts gets blocked.
So he had a varicocele.
Yes, I
or
think
a hydrocele.
Hydrocele
Hydrocele's fluid.
Hydrocele
is fluid around the testis. So
yes.
Your scrotum or your sac on one side looks like you've stuffed a party balloon in it.
Yeah. So he had hydrocele, but even him as a person, I think at the time who was third year med school, maybe fourth year med school, even him, the inbuilt denial of medical problems ran so deep that even he was like, no, it's always been that size. One's always been a bit bigger than the other. It's fine. And it just like gone around. And this is how people, like you say, can almost accumulate this little collection of things. It's like, well, one of them has got to the point where I need to see you about that. And by the way, here's all of the other shit that I didn't want to bring up in the interim. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's the, sort of in the introduction, I talk a bit about windows and the idea that, as a GP, I hold up this window pane and stare into your life. I see your house, I see your, I'm looking at your life, and there are different types of patients. So you get the patients who come in and say, hold up the window and they point at their knee and say, Max, I've got knee pain. Can you look at it? And you get those who sort of hold up a window and go, Max, I'm worried about my cholesterol. But then I say, you're worried about your cholesterol, but I've just spied your blood sugar result, and I'm worried about you developing diabetes. So different agenda. And then finally you get people who hold up the window to someone else and they go, I'm worried about my loved one. And they say, I'm worried. Often I'm worried about my aging parent. I think they're getting a bit more confused. I'm worried they've got dementia. So it's not that it's not about them, it's about another person. And they're the challenging cases because you're kind of, you can't necessarily talk to that person who's come to see you about somebody else. You can't talk to you can listen to them. You can listen to everything they have to say, but you can't necessarily say, here's what I'm going to do. You can say, okay, I'm going to book to have them come in and see them myself. But you can't discuss someone else's case, if, with a relative, if they haven't given permission. So yeah, it's all about windows and journeys.
It's interesting that the process of someone who isn't the patient coming in on behalf of the patient, I imagine that must be, there's a whole host of different tripwires for both parties to fall over there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gets, it gets a bit muddy when you kind of look at teenagers. When you start, you phone up, you see you've got a 15-year-old patient. She's phoned up and she wants the oral contraceptive pill. And you look at her phone details and it's got the home phone number and then a mobile number. And you've got no idea if that's mum's mobile number, dad's mobile number, the guardian's mobile number, the nanny's, or the patient's. And then you phone and you're like, hello, it's Dr. Skittle. Can I speak to so-and-so? And then immediately, like the next day, you might get a phone call from the mother saying, what did you talk to my daughter about? And you have to say, well, look, I'm really sorry, but it's confidential. And yes, she is under 16, but she has something called Gillick competence, which basically says, which is specific around sort of contraception. So young girls who want to have oral contraception.
It's called Gillick competence.
Gillick, Gillick.
Gillick.
And there's also Fraser competence as well, which is sort of bigger picture. But it's basically saying, if someone is in a sexual relationship under the age of 16 and it is with someone of a similar age, there's no signs of abuse or grooming, and they are going to have sex anyway. You don't want to be the doctor that says, well, fine, I'm not going to give you contraception because you're under 16. What you say is, well, look, if you are not going to stop having sex, I want to help you be as safe as you can be and against unwanted pregnancies. And of course, counselling about safe sex and condoms and STIs is a whole different issue. But if that patient, if that young girl has the capacity to retain, understand, and communicate the decision that they would like to make, you have to respect that, and you have to respect their confidentiality. And the only time you would break it is if you suddenly found that there were, signs of abuse or grooming or anything that made you feel that this was a safeguarding issue. But if the mother calls, you have very, very difficult conversations because you essentially are, your duty is to the patient, and all you can do is encourage the patient to speak to her mother. And of course you do that. You don't just go, oh, let's keep this secret between you and I. You say, do you want to talk about this with your mother? Because it's a big issue. And I think that, it would be really helpful if she's supportive. And we get that. I get teenagers coming with their mum and saying, I'd like to go on the contraceptive pill. And it might not be for safe sex, for sort of protecting against unwanted pregnancies. It might be because they're having really difficult problems with their menstrual cycle, which, as a GP, as a male GP, is something I never thought I'd be so comfortable talking about. But, after all these years, like we see it every day. We talk about it every day.
Everyone, just a bit of menstruation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because that is normal. I mean, the worst, most frustrating case I had, just to talk about menstruation for a second, Chris.
Finally, that's what we're here for.
Was I had a teenager come in with her mum, really embarrassed, and the school had actually asked for her to get a letter from the GP to explain why she was able to be excused from her classes because of her heavy and painful menstrual cycle, which infuriated me because this is a natural, normal, healthy, physiological process for women. And it was 100% stigmatized by that school in that moment and embarrassed that child. She was a child, she was sort of 14 years old, and embarrassed her for the fact that she has to hand a letter to her teachers. So then I basically said, well, fine, here's a letter, but I'm going to extend my scope of that letter and say that teachers are not to be asking her what she's leaving the classroom for. So for all I know, she can go out whenever she wants now.
She's got the free hall pass. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. but the point, and also the school can pick up the phone and speak to me if they want to talk about anything else, because just a child, a 14-year-old, should not be made to feel like that. And just they're things that I feel just really strongly about. Like, you have to fight these people's corner, because people will say, oh no, that's normal. You need to say, and actually, no, it's not. You shouldn't be stigmatizing something that is a healthy process, a normal physiological process in women, and making this young girl feel uncomfortable, and make her feel potentially more uncomfortable about talking about it with other professionals in the future.
Any harder? Well, this is we spoke recently on this show to do with the peak end rule. Have you heard about this?
No.
Okay. This might be interesting.
Educate me.
This might be interesting for you as someone who has to deal with a high volume of patients, and you don't want to cause problems. The peak end rule is a psychological bias that suggests our memory applies a higher weight to the most intense and the end of any experience. So let's say that you're going on a roller coaster, you will remember the most scary bit and the last bit. And the original study was conducted during endoscopies. And what they found was that they could actually extend the length of time that someone was undergoing the surgery and bring their level of discomfort down at the end. And the rate of perceived discomfort retrospectively ended up being significantly lower, even though by every objective measure, they'd actually left it in for longer than it needed to be. And I wonder, when I was thinking about that, there was this quote where they said one of the most compassionate things that you can do for a young child, your young child, that's going to a doctor's or a dentist's or whatever, if they're going to have something that's going to make them feel uncomfortable, is to do that, is to almost extend it and dampen down the discomfort toward the end. Because over time, that compounding effect, that girl now, you hit the nail on the head, could be terrified of talking to anybody in authority about anything to do with her body for the rest of life. Or, a 3-year-old that needs to have a complicated dentist operation and it's kind of a bit painful and whatever. And that's it. Rest of your life terrified of the dentist. Big implications here.
Absolutely. And because of that, I think that, you strip the medicine out of it, being a GP or being in healthcare in general, you have a huge responsibility, because every patient contact you have, particularly with children, you are setting the tone. You're setting a bar at which their experiences of seeing a doctor or a healthcare professional, which is why when I see kids, it is as fun for me as it hopefully is for them. There are stickers. We talk about their favorite toys or what sports they like, and often they don't really even realize that they're being examined or that we've done a consultation. And in the same measure, whenever someone comes with a parent, you talk to the child first. Like, you don't talk to the parent, and that's really, really important, because they need to realize that you are my focus. It's about you. So I'll be like, Mum and Dad, just sit tight for a second. I want to hear from little Susie. And then I'll chat to her. And then at the end, I'll go, Susie, do you mind if I ask your mum and dad some questions as well? And, more often than not, they'll say, yeah, fine. Because it has to be about them. And then they enjoy it. And one of the, most rewarding thing about my experiences working in a city GP is that I'll get kids come back and want to see me. Or even it's a sister of a little boy that I saw, but the little boy wanted to come with the sister because they were coming back to see me and they wanted to have another sticker.
Such a trip to go and see Dr. Skittle. Yeah, that's cool, man.
Which is really nice. And actually, whatever, all the shit that happens, it's stuff like that that's just really heartwarming and just makes me love the job. And I spoke to a patient the other day who was having a real change of life direction, had got through some quite difficult mental health issues. And he was like, just to say thanks, like, you totally changed my life. And it's not about changing people's lives, and it's nothing to do that. But my God, it was really nice to hear that actually you'd had that kind of an impact. That's
really lovely to hear. I tweeted something similar the other day that said, if you love your favorite content creators, tell them that you enjoy their content, because a message means an awful lot more than a play count. And it's the same for you. Like, just getting someone better, that is more than sufficient. That's why you say it over and over again in the book. You do it for that reason as a caregiver. But someone coming back to do that must really sort of drive that nail home.
It does. It really does. And that's, I mean, I love it. I mean, you don't go looking for it, and you don't sort of I certainly don't go to work every day expecting to see it or hear it. But when it comes along, it's lovely.
Pretty special.
Yeah.
What do you wish that Dr. Skittle from 5 years ago knew that you know now with regards to work? Or if you've got some junior doctors, perhaps ones that are just about to graduate or ones that are on locum and about to go into, what are some of the things that they should know or that you wish you'd known?
Well, that's a tough question. Let me just think about that for a second. What would I want to tell somebody?
Just what are your
that it gets easier in many respects. That the sort of the conscious processes that you go through as a doctor get more automated. And when I see a patient now, I don't think, right, what is their presenting complaint? Right, what's their past medical history? Right, what's their drug history? Right, what's their social history? It just comes out in a conversation. And I think that's what I would say from a professional perspective. From a personal perspective, I would say always look after your own well-being as well, because you can burn out very easily as a doctor or a nurse or any healthcare professional if you just don't eat, don't drink, don't sleep, don't look after yourself in some way. Don't look after yourself in some way, because if you do that, you're then no good to the patient. You need a help to, be blunt. Being really blunt, you need a healthy GP. If you pick a burnt out, exhausted, just emotionally shattered shell of a man or a woman, they are not going to want to help you at 6:30 on a Friday if you're the umpteenth patient they've seen, and that's their capacity. You need someone who is just ready to keep going, feels fresh, and that's why it's so important. And also partly, and I really feel like I should explain this, why we don't work 5 days a week in clinics. I don't work Monday to Friday seeing patients every single day. There's one day where I do something differently. And that's because emotionally you can't handle that burden, and you would really burn out quite quickly.
I found that so interesting. The sort of parting insight that I'd love to get from you is how doctors deal with the emotional distress and the trauma associated with the job, because you get taught all of the things that you need to do, but from, again, speaking to a ton of buddies that have been through med school, it doesn't seem like there's a massive amount of explanation on how to deal with being unable to save a patient's life that you really cared about, or hearing a sad story about a family member who doesn't want to come in, or any of that stuff. What are some of the ways that you've found are effective for getting through that? So
I mean, for me, I've always found that I've been able to manage those things quite well. But I think what really helps is the things that help all of us. It's exercising, it's trying to eat well, and talking to your friends about these things, or talking to your loved ones, and just decompressing, writing a book. I don't know. You've just got to find ways to get through it, but people will deal with it very differently. And general practice is an interesting one, because you get characters in your GPs who are incredibly soft and softly spoken to very brash and brutish, and everything in between. And I think that there's no big lessons. It's just about this knowing doing gap. I think we're all intelligent. We all know what we should be doing. We all know what helps someone de-stress and process work stresses. It doesn't have to be just being general practice or healthcare, and it's about recognizing what you know you should be doing and actually doing it. I think sometimes that's the gap. So, for example, for me at the moment, I know I haven't exercised for about 4 weeks, and I absolutely know that I should be doing it. But my God, Chris, I cannot drag myself out for that first run.
Gyms are open soon. Don't worry, Max. Gyms are open in a couple of weeks' time. We don't know how long for. So there's some really cool takeaways here. I love the idea of turning up on time, dressing appropriately, and not letting everything build up. Hopefully will have helped a bunch of doctors and potential med students as well. I didn't get round to this, but another tip would be don't come in and show me a photo of your arsehole. That would also be... Was it a photo or a video?
It was a photo. A photo looked like a sort of brown drawstring bag, and I was like, "Well, what do you want me to do with that? I need to see it.
Get it? Look.
I need to see it." I've actually had. It's been an interesting few weeks. I've had quite a few dick pics recently, actually, from patients. So,
okay. Is that
all
because
all clinically indicated?
Yep.
But it happens, and that's the other probably one of the golden takeaways is don't be embarrassed. Like I've seen it all. Like your GP has seen it all. Like don't be shy about talking about problems with your anus or a vagina or a breast or what happens during sex or pain during sex. Like it could be a symptom of something. So just talk to us about it. And a good GP will make you feel comfortable when you do that. And I think that's the real litmus test. You have to feel comfortable as a patient with who you are speaking to, and that's something that I work to every day.
It's just an arsehole. Everyone's got one. That is the parting note of Dr. Max Skittle.
Should have been on the back of the book, shouldn't it?
And it's just an arsehole. Everyone's got one. Usually I'd be, hey man, what do you want to plug? You need people to find you, but you are actively anonymous. So all that I can say is The Secret GP will be linked in the show notes below. Go and check that out on Amazon. Really cool read. Fans of Adam Kay. I've also got Chris Daw QC from Justice on Trial coming on very soon. It sounds an awful lot like he's going to do the litigative, the law side version of this. So that'll be really interesting. But man, thank you so much. Love the book, and good luck getting through the rest of coronavirus.
Thanks, Chris. Take care. Cheers,
thank you.
Bye bye.